Good morning. Today we are going to see the second topic in mineral metabolism, the mechanism of mineralization and the role of alkaline phosphatase in health and disease. What is biomineralization? It is the process by which the hydroxyapatite is deposited on the extracellular matrix. That is called biomineralization. And there are two types of mineralization which happens in the body. One is the physiological mineralization and the other one is the pathological mineralization. Physiological mineralization happens in the hard tissues, while pathological calcification occurs in the soft tissues. So pathological calcifications can occur in the articular cartilage, cardiovascular tissues, kidney. They are all more prone to pathologic calcifications. Whereas physiological mineralization occurs in hard tissues like bone, growth, plate cartilage, and in dentin. So in bone, the main cells which are responsible for mineralization is the osteoblast, so which lines the osteoid, and it is responsible for the deposition of hydroxyapatite. And in the growth plate cartilage, the mineralization occurs in the hypertrophic zone, where the late proliferative and early hypertrophic chondrocytes are responsible for the hydroxyapatite formation. So in the cartilage, chondrocytes are responsible for mineralization. In the bone, osteoblasts are responsible for mineralization. Whereas in the teeth, odontoblasts are responsible for the bone formation. So there are many theories in bone formation, and in which the matrix vesicle theory is the most accepted one. So today I am going to talk about the matrix vesicle mineralization, and later in the next seminar we will talk about the other theories of mineralization. So matrix vesicle. What are matrix vesicles? These are the extracellular membrane-infested vesicles, which are 50 to 200 nanometers in diameter, and that are formed by polarized budding from the surface membranes of chondrocytes, osteoblasts, and odontoblasts. So they bud out and they form the vesicles in these cells. So the signals that release the matrix vesicles are the concentrations of intracellular calcium and extracellular phosphate. So there should be some trigger for the formation of the vesicles. That is the concentration of the intracellular calcium and the extracellular phosphate, which forms the vesicle. This is the vesicle which are formed by the chondrocytes, osteoblasts, or the odontoblasts. What does a matrix vesicle contain? They are rich in several phospholipids, especially phosphatidylserine, a lipid with a high affinity for calcium. So this lipid is very attractive to calcium. And the matrix vesicles are also rich in annexins. Annexins are something like this. They will be present on the membrane of the vesicles. There are different types of annexins, and there is calcium ATPase, calbindin D90. We talked about calbindin D90 in the last seminar, which helps in transporting the calcium inside the cell from one end to the other end. So calbindin D90, carbonic anhydrase is an enzyme, collagen and alkaline phosphatase, and nucleotide pyrophosphatase phosphodiesterase. Type 3 sodium phosphate co-transporter. These are the transporters which are present on the matrix vesicle membrane. So this is how a matrix vesicle will look, and all the other organelles or the structures which I explained are present in this matrix vesicle. So that's about matrix vesicle. So how does the mineralization occur? So mineralization occurs in two steps. So what happens first? It begins with the formation of hydroxyapatite crystals within the matrix vesicles. So the matrix vesicles are present inside the osteoblast or chondrocyte or the odontoblasts as small vesicles, and inside that vesicles the hydroxyapatite crystallizes, which is followed by propagation of the hydroxyapatite to the membrane into the extracellular matrix. Like we see here, it starts forming intracellularly and then it projects outside. Once it is saturated here, it starts projecting outside. This is how the mineralization starts. And the calcium binding phospholipids, including the phosphatidylserine, which I told already, it has more affinity to calcium. The calcium binding proteins, including the calbindin D90 and the bone siloprotein, promote the accumulation of calcium within the matrix vesicles. So for the calcification to happen, mineralization to happen, we need calcium and phosphate. For that, the calcium has to be present within the matrix vesicles, which is more facilitated by these things. So annexins in the matrix vesicles form a calcium channel and incorporate calcium into the matrix vesicle. So we have gates like this, these annexins. There are different types of annexins, and through which they allow the calcium to enter into vesicles. And the cytosolic phosphatase, which is phospho-1, produces the phosphate by hydrolyzing phosphofuran and phosphoethanolamine, which are derived from membrane phospholipids by phospholipase C. So the membrane is a phospholipid membrane. So in that way, the phosphatase enzyme helps in giving the phosphate ions into the matrix vesicles. The phosphates are provided by the type 3 sodium pico transmitter located on both the cell membrane and the matrix vesicle. Cell membrane is the cell membrane of the osteoblast, odontoblast or the chondrocyte, and the cell membrane of the matrix vesicle. Both provide this type 3 sodium pico transporter. And when the accumulation of calcium and phosphate exceeds the solubility point of calcium phosphate deposition in the form of hydroxyapatite occurs within the matrix vesicles. So this is the first step in mineralization. And in the second step of mineralization, the hydroxyapatite crystals penetrate the matrix vesicle membrane and elongate into the extracellular space inside the cell itself. So it starts expanding outside. So the extracellular fluid in a growth plate matrix contains sufficient calcium and inorganic phosphate to support continuous formation of new hydroxyapatite crystals. So wherever it goes, that place also should have more of calcium and phosphate for the crystals to grow. That is provided by the extracellular matrix. The PPI is a pyrophosphate which inhibits the formation of hydroxyapatite. So this we have to keep in mind. This PPI is an inhibitor of mineralization. So that is also present. So how this PPI is managed? The PPI is provided by many sources, which is localized on the membranes of the hypertrophic chondrocytes and osteoblasts. So how does this manage? It is managed by the alkaline phosphatase. Alkaline phosphatase hydrolyzes PPI to generate PI. PI is the inorganic phosphates. Inorganic phosphates and calcium are necessary for calcification, mineralization, whereas pyrophosphatase is an inhibitor of mineralization. This is handled by alkaline phosphatase. The hydroxyapatite is propagated in clusters around the matrix vesicles and fills the space between the collagen fibers in the skeletal matrices. So the ratio of PI to inorganic pyrophosphatase is crucial in the second step of mineralization. So in the second step of mineralization, there should be the inhibitor and the promoter has to be in a balance. Then only the mineralization will continue. So these are the steps of mineralization. And now we have seen that alkaline phosphatase plays an important role in the mineralization. We will go deep into alkaline phosphatase. So these are nothing but membrane-bound ectoenzymes that hydrolyze monophosphate esters at a high pH. Hence the name alkaline. So pH of 8 to 10. The other one is an acid phosphatase, which is different and occurs in different tissues. So this is alkaline phosphatase. And the human alkaline phosphatase is classified into 4 types. One is tissue non-specific, intestinal, placental and germ cell, of which the tissue non-specific type is present in many tissues, including the liver, bone and kidney, hence the name LVK. We call it LVK. The tissue non-specific alkaline phosphatase is expressed on the cell membrane of hypertrophic chondrocytes, osteoblasts and odontoblasts, and is also concentrated on the membranes of the matrix vesicles budding from these cells. So even the cell and its matrix vesicles contain this tissue non-specific alkaline phosphatase. So the human tissue non-specific alkaline phosphatase and the placental alkaline phosphatase. In the 4 types, we saw there is one placental form also. So in that, these share a 57% identity and they have 74% homology. Identity is quantitative, homology is qualitative. And the physiological substrates of TNAP, that is tissue non-specific alkaline phosphatase, are thought to be the PPI, pyridoxal 5-phosphate and the phosphoethanolamine. So from where the TNAP is produced, it is from this stage. PPI we already know. Pyridoxal 5-phosphate is nothing but vitamin B6 and phosphoethanolamine. So what happens? The gene encoding the tissue non-specific alkaline phosphatase is the AAPL gene. This is also an important thing. Which is mapped in the chromosome 1. So chromosome 1 is an autosomal chromosome and consists of 11 coding exons. These are details of the chromosome which is present there. So for the formation of TNAP, vitamin D is also important, which is an activated form of vitamin D3 and a regulator of mineralization which promotes TNAP expression, not by increasing the transcriptional activity but by post-transcriptional modulation via increasing TNAP mRNA stability. So in post-transcriptional modulation, this vitamin D3 helps. And what about phosphates which activate the expression of TNAP? The beta glycerophosphates activates both TNAP expression and mineralization. Inhibition of TNAP activity suppresses the mineralization, and the TNAP mRNA level in vitro which suggests that phosphate derived from beta glycerophosphate by TNAP regulates the expression of TNAP. And when we talk about PLP, which is vitamin B6, which is an activated form of vitamin B6, is needed as a cofactor in neuronal cells to form neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, histamine, which is GABA, and taurine. So what happens? These are expressed in neuronal cells. So the B6 has to enter into the brain, but it cannot enter as a phosphorylated form. It has to enter in a pyridoxal form. For that, alkaline phosphatase will help. Now this B6 is also necessary for the TNAP also. PLP cannot be transported into the cells. Instead, TNAP dephosphorylates the PLP into pyridoxal, which is able to enter the cells. Hence, the TNAP is also important in the vitamin B6 transportation aspect. And TNAP is important in the hydrolysis of PPA, as I already mentioned, as PPA is an inhibitor of mineralization. So this is about alkaline phosphatase. This is the physiology of alkaline phosphatase. So what happens when there is a deficiency or there is a mutation in that ALP gene in the body? It causes hypophosphatasia. Hypophosphatasia is a rare inherited systemic bone disease caused by mutations of the ALPL gene. So hypophosphatasia is inherited as an autosomal recessive trait, but in some other cases autosomal dominant is also reported. You can see the ALPL gene, pyridoxal triphosphate is also involved. So how is this alkaline phosphatase acting inside a cell? So the ATP has to be converted into ADP by alkaline phosphatase, where one phosphate is removed. Again, it acts on ADP to form AMP. This AMP only is transfers the signal into the nucleus to form the formation of differentiation into the minerals. But when there is a lack of these things, so this is inhibited. ATP inhibits the enzyme which transmits the signal. So here the alkaline phosphatase play an important role. So it is characterized by hypomineralization of heart tissues. So what happens when there is hypophosphatasia? There is no phosphates, so there is no calcium phosphate formation, and there is hypomineralization in the heart tissue. And there are 5 forms. One is perinatal, infantile, childhood, adult, and odontophosphatasia. According to the disease severity, they have classified this form. So when we see about the perinatal form, this is the most severe form and often results in death of the affected fetus. So here we can see the X-ray which shows the hypomineralized bones of the fetus. And the infantile form occurs within 6 months of birth, which reads there is a respiratory failure, which is the main cause of death. This is the infantile form. It forms after the birth, 6 months after birth. And the childhood form presents within 2 years of birth and is characterized by milder symptoms, deformity of the extremities and premature loss of deciduosity. So you can see the deformity in the bones, you can see loss of deciduosity, and there is different dental anomalies also. The adult form of the disease presents during middle age with mild symptoms. And what is the odontohypophosphatasia? It is characterized by dental manifestation but not skeletal defects. So mostly it is the dental manifestation which happens here rather than the skeletal defects. So how is this hypophosphatasia diagnosed? So it has been diagnosed on the basis of ultrasonographic findings in fetuses. Like you can see the bone. The severe form of the disease can be found, but serum ALP, alkaline phosphatase only, is lacking here. That is the usual means of obtaining a diagnosis. And we can measure the substrates of TNAP. As I told, there are these substrates for TNAP like vitamin D3, PLP, PPA, all those things. The plasma PLP levels are sensitive, but contamination due to oral vitamin B6. If somebody is taking vitamin B6 supplementation, that might be a false positive. And the plasma PPA levels also can be used as a diagnostic value, but increase in plasma PPA directly reflects the accumulation of PPA in bone. The DNA-based diagnosis using genomic DNA from the chorionic villi is the most reliable method, assuming the absence of maternal DNA contamination. Chorionic villi is the part inside the uterus where the maternal and the fetal blood gets exchanged. That area